Hey everybody, my name is Pete, and today I'm walking you through an introduction to Excel keyboard shortcuts. I remember when I learned my first keyboard shortcut and how quickly I was able to complete common tasks in Excel and how much they boosted my productivity. And by the end of this video, you're going to be taking advantage of Excel's most powerful features using just the keyboard and not the mouse, and that's going to let you work quickly and boost your productivity as well. I've divided this video up into timestamps so that you can jump to the content that's most relevant to you, and let's get started. Most of these shortcuts have been around for a while, and when there's a shortcut that will only work with the latest version of Excel, I'm using 365. I will note that in the description. Let's get started with the classics. Control W closes your workbook. Control O opens your workbook. Control N creates a new workbook. Control C copies a cell, and Control V pastes that cell. Control X cuts the cell, and of course Control V pastes the cell. Now, if you want to undo what you just did, press Control Z to undo. And if you want to redo what you just did, press Control Y to redo. Now, if you're still printing these days, Control P opens up that print dialog box. And one of my favorite keys in Excel is the escape key, because that lets you easily exit any menu item. To save as, click Alt F-A. And to navigate throughout this menu, click on the letter or number that corresponds with the area that you're trying to save as. So in this instance, I'm going to press O, and that's going to open up the browse menu, and then you can save as accordingly. Let's cover those keyboard shortcuts that are going to help you navigate around your spreadsheet. The arrow keys are a great way to get around. So if you want to move to the right, click the right arrow key. If you want to move down, down, left, click the left arrow key, and then up, click the up arrow key. Control arrow key takes you to the last filled cell in a range of cells. So when you press Control right, it takes you to the last filled cell in that range. Control down, the last filled cell at the bottom. Control left, and then Control up. Control end takes you to the last filled cell in the entire spreadsheet, and then Control home takes you back up to the top of the page. Control page down lets you navigate between the different tabs in your worksheet to the right, and then Control page up lets you navigate the different tabs to the left. Now, one thing I'm always doing is freezing panes to make sure that a given row is visible all the time. So that's Alt W F F. And page down lets you move one screen up or one screen down. So when I click page down, we move one screen down, and that row 2 stays in place and is always visible. Page up lets you move one screen up. Now, I have the grid lines hidden right now, but if you want to show those grid lines, Alt W VG, and that's going to show the grid lines, and the same keyboard combination will hide those grid lines. Another thing I'm doing all the time is changing the zoom, so that's Alt W Q. And you can navigate this menu using the arrow key and press enter when you find your selection. And let's go ahead and undo that. Alt page down moves one screen to the right in a worksheet, and Alt page up moves one screen to the left. Let's talk about data entry quickly. Alt down arrow opens a list of validation choices that are reflected in the cells above it. You can press enter to make that selection, and tab over to the next cell and press Alt down arrow to open that list. Continue to do so until you're done, and then press enter, and Excel puts you on a new row in the same range of cells so that you can repeat the process all over again. Control tab lets you cycle through all your open workbooks. And Control Shift tab lets you do so in the opposite order. And lastly, this isn't an Excel specific shortcut, but it is a good one. Alt tab cycles you through the different applications that you have open, and Alt Shift tab does so in the opposite order. Let's talk about keyboard shortcuts that let you make selections and perform actions. Control Shift arrow key selects all the cells to the last non-blank cell in the row. So Control Shift arrow up selects all the cells to the last non-blank cell up. Control Shift arrow to the right does the same. Now Control A selects the current region of cells. Control Spacebar selects the entire column, and Shift Spacebar selects the entire row. Now, if you want to add a cell, Control Shift plus adds a cell, and you have to select whether you want to shift those cells right, down. So in this instance, we'll select down. Shift space selects the entire row, and Control Shift plus adds a new row. Control space selects the entire column, and Control Shift plus adds the column. Similarly, Control minus removes the selection of cells. So in this instance, Control minus is going to remove that column, and you can press Shift Spacebar and Control minus to remove that row. And you can also use Control minus on an individual cell, but you have to choose whether you want to shift those cells up or to the left, and you can make that selection by pressing Enter. Control 0 hides columns, and Control 9 hides rows. Control F brings up the Find and Replace menu, and this is our first menu, and you can navigate them using a few simple shortcuts. The Tab key cycles through the available options in the menu, and the Shift Tab key does so in the reverse order. Now, Control Page Down is going to move you from the Find tab to the Replace tab, and Control Page Up is going to move you back. I also want to draw your attention to the small underlined letters in the menu, and by clicking the Alt key in combination of one of those letters, you're going to perform the action associated with that letter. In this instance, we're going to find mug, and when I press Alt F, it's going to find next according to that underlined letter. Now you can also find and replace, and instead of using the Alt key, you can just tab over to the selection that you want to make, and you can press Enter instead. I know I have a way that I like to format cells, and I do so quite often, so now we're going to cover the common keyboard shortcuts to help you format cells. Control B formats the cell as bold, Control I formats the cell as italics, and Control U formats the cell as an underline. Control 5 is everyone's favorite shortcut, which applies that strikethrough format. Control Shift 1 applies the number format with 2 decimals. And to decrease decimals, press Alt H 9, and you can press that as many times as you want to decrease the decimals. Control Shift 4 applies the dollar format with 2 decimals. Control Shift 5 applies the percentage format. Those are the Control Shift combinations that I use the most, but for the sake of completeness, we'll run through them all. Control Shift 2 formats it as a time. Control Shift 3 formats as a date. Control Shift 6 formats as scientific notation. Interestingly enough, Control Shift 7 actually applies a border to a cell, and if you want to get rid of that border, you can press Control Shift minus. Now, one thing I do also a lot in Excel is autofit the cell width to the contents of the cell, and to do that, press Alt H O and I. Alt HH brings up the color menu, and you can navigate through that using the arrow keys and make your selection by pressing Enter. Let's talk quickly about pasting special. You can do so using Control Alt V and Alt ESV. So I'm going to use Control Alt V, and that brings up the paste special menu. I will also bring your attention to those small underlines under the letters, and that Alt key selection works here as well. So when I want to do formats, I press Alt T and then press Enter to make that selection. Similarly, I can come in here and I can press Alt V, and that's going to paste values. Now, if there's any more formatting selections that you want to make, you can press Control 1 to open the Format Cells dialog box, and you can use all of the menu navigation tips that we've discussed. Control page down to navigate through the tabs, and Alt key to make your selections. In this instance, Alt W enables wrapping of text. Now we're going to finish with the keyboard shortcuts that help you with data, functions, and formulas. So F2 lets you edit the active cell. And from here you can go in and make changes as you see fit. Alt-Enter adds a sum formula, and it recognizes where the data is, so it knows in this instance the data is above. But you can also put it to the side, and it recognizes that it needs to sum to the left. To start a formula, press the plus sign and start typing the formula that you want to complete, and then you can arrow key down to the formula that you want to enter and press tab to fill out the entire formula. Now, this requires us to highlight a range of cells, so I'm going to arrow key up to the first cell that I want to highlight, and then I'm going to press Shift arrow key to make my selection, and then close parentheses. Control D fills down the cell with what's above it, so I'm going to press Control D, and you'll see that that average formula is filled down. Likewise, Control R fills to the right, and you'll see that average formula fills to the right. Now, if you want to lock these cells in place and apply an absolute reference, you can enter with F2, you can press Shift arrow key to make the selection, and you press F4 to apply that absolute reference formula. And what that means is when I press Control D, that range of cells will remain consistent no matter where I copy and paste that cell. Control backtick is a great way to look at all of the different formulas in your spreadsheet. And as you can see here, it shows you which cells have a formula and which cells do not. And you can press Control backtick to return to the original screen. Control Shift L applies filters to your range of cells. And then to apply a filter using a keyboard shortcut, press the Alt arrow key, and that's going to open this filter menu. And then the space bar lets you make selections and toggle that check mark on and off. So when I click space, it makes those selections, and enter simply activates them. And Control Shift L removes those filters as well. And the last keyboard shortcut is Control T. That lets you format your data as a table and unlock all of the different powerful features that tables have. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Click subscribe so you can stay up to date on all of my videos. If you learned something in this video, click the like button. I love to see those likes come through. It makes me feel so good. Let me know in the comments section below which keyboard shortcut you use the most or which ones I forgot. And lastly, check out the description for a link to a workbook that you can use to practice all the things we covered in this video, and also a link to a printable PDF of all of the keyboard shortcuts. Thanks so much for tuning in.